A film arrived from the underground with no interest in following the rules. It was violent. It was strange. It was filled with alien worlds, impossible creatures, and ideas that traditional animation had never dared to explore. But behind the movie, audiences watched in theaters, was another version of the story. A version with missing pieces. A version where the mysterious force connecting the entire film had a much larger history. And for decades, one forgotten segment remained hidden from most viewers. A lost chapter called Neverwhere. A sequence created during the making of Heavy Metal that promised to reveal a deeper story behind the strange green force known as the Loch-Nah. But before we uncover what disappeared, think back to the first time you discovered heavy metal. Was it in a theater when it first arrived? Did you find it years later on VHS, late-night television, cable, DVD, or through a copy shared between friends? Because heavy metal was never the kind of movie people simply watched and forgot. It was the kind of film people discovered. A strange experience that felt like it came from another world. And hidden inside that experience was a story that would take decades to fully understand. In the late 1970s, science fiction was changing. Audiences were looking for something different. The genre was moving beyond simple space adventures and becoming a place for darker ideas, unusual worlds, and stories that questioned the future of humanity. At the same time, a revolution was happening in comics. In France, a magazine called Metal Hurlant introduced readers to futuristic landscapes, strange creatures, and artwork that looked unlike anything in mainstream entertainment. The publication was created by artists and writers who wanted complete creative freedom. Their stories were not designed for children. They explored adult themes, surreal concepts, and worlds where fantasy and science fiction existed together. When the magazine reached American audiences under the name Heavy Metal, it gained a reputation as something completely different. It was not just a comic. It became a symbol of artistic rebellion. The artwork was detailed, imaginative, and unpredictable. Every page felt like it was opening a door to another universe. Naturally, filmmakers began wondering if this unusual world could exist on screen. But adapting heavy metal was not a simple task. The magazine did not contain one single story. It was a collection of different ideas created by different artists. Each story had its own characters, style, and atmosphere. The solution was to create an animated anthology. Instead of following one hero, the film would connect multiple stories through one mysterious object. That object became the Loch-Nah, a glowing green force traveling across space and time. Wherever it appeared, it brought destruction, corruption, and chaos. The Loch-Nah became the connection between different worlds. But the production of Heavy Metal was one of the most complicated animated projects of its time. Multiple animation studios worked on different sections of the movie. Each team brought its own visual style. Some parts looked futuristic and mechanical. Others looked like fantasy artwork moving on screen. Others carried the rough energy of underground comics. This creative freedom gave the film its unique identity. But it also created major challenges. Different studios had different working methods. Every segment required time. Every scene required thousands of drawings. And the movie continued becoming larger and more complicated. During production, the filmmakers created many ideas that never reached the final version. Some were changed, some were shortened, and some disappeared completely. One of the most ambitious missing pieces was Neverwhere. Unlike a small deleted scene, Neverwhere was designed as a complete segment. It was created to expand the mythology of heavy metal and explain something audiences only partially understood. The Loch-Nah was always mysterious. The final film showed it moving between different worlds, destroying everything in its path. But Neverwhere explored a much bigger question. What happened before these events? How did this strange force affect civilizations throughout history? The segment imagined the Lochnar arriving on a planet and influencing the development of an entire civilization. It would show the growth of societies, the rise of technology, the desire for power, and the destruction that followed. Instead of focusing on one character's adventure, Neverwhere looked at history on a much larger scale. It treated the Lochnar almost like a force of nature, something that could change civilizations over generations. The idea gave heavy metal a deeper connection between its different stories. The movie was not simply a collection of strange adventures. It was about a repeating cycle: creation, ambition, destruction, and rebirth. The segment was developed by animator Corny Cole and represented one of the more ambitious ideas created during production. But ambition created another problem. Heavy metal was already packed with different stories. The filmmakers had to balance multiple animation teams, different visual styles, and a growing production schedule. The movie had limits. A theatrical release could only be a certain length. Eventually, difficult decisions had to be made, and one of those decisions removed Neverwhere from the final film. For audiences in 1981, the segment simply did not exist. The Lochnar remained mysterious. The different stories continued, but a major part of the movie's original vision was missing. And this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because the missing segment did not completely disappear. The artwork, production information, and memories surrounding it remained. Over the years, fans became fascinated with the hidden history of heavy metal. They wanted to know what had been changed, what had been removed, and what the movie could have looked like if every original idea had survived. The story of Neverwhere became one of the biggest examples of how a film's history can continue long after release. Many viewers think deleted material is removed because it was not good enough. But that is not always true. Sometimes scenes disappear because a movie has too many ideas. Sometimes filmmakers have to choose what the audience needs to see. Heavy metal was already an unusual experiment. Adding a complete historical journey about the Lochnar could have changed the entire structure of the film. The final theatrical version became the movie people knew. But decades later, the missing material started finding its way back into the conversation. Home video changed everything for older films. DVDs, special editions, and restored releases allowed audiences to see behind-the-scenes material that was impossible to experience in theaters. For heavy metal fans, this meant discovering pieces of the creative process that had remained hidden for years. Neverwhere was no longer just a rumor. It became evidence of how much larger the original vision had been. The recovered material showed that heavy metal was not only about shocking visuals and rock music, it was also about building a strange mythology around a force that could shape entire worlds. And that is why the return of this missing segment matters. It was not simply extra footage added decades later. It was a missing piece of the movie's identity. Heavy metal arrived during a unique moment in cinema history, a time when artists were experimenting with what animation could become. The film proved that animation could tell darker stories. It could explore adult ideas. It could create worlds that felt impossible. And even after more than 40 years, the movie continues to attract new audiences because it still feels unlike anything else. The story of Neverwhere is a reminder that every film has a hidden history. Behind every finished scene are ideas that were rewritten, removed, or forgotten. Some disappear forever. Others wait patiently until someone finds them again. Heavy metal's missing segment followed that exact journey. It was created, it was lost, it became a mystery, and eventually, It returned to show audiences a different side of a film that was always bigger than it first appeared. Sometimes, the most fascinating stories in cinema are not the ones that made it to the screen. They are the ones that almost did. The story of Heavy Metal proves that sometimes the most fascinating parts of a movie are the ones that were almost lost forever. From forgotten ideas to recovered footage, its history continues to surprise fans decades later. If you enjoyed exploring this hidden chapter of cinema history, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more forgotten movies, lost scenes, and behind-the-scenes stories from the world of film. Let us know which movie we should uncover next.